IISD Reporting Services is here in Cancun, Mexico, reporting on selected side events, convening in parallel with the 5th session of the Global Environment Facility Council meeting. A side event was held on Sunday, May 25th, called Taking Deforestation Out of Commodity Supply Chains. Ian Gray from the Global Environment Facility welcomed participants, highlighting the importance of integrated approaches for the future of commodities.
We realize now that separate actions just don't work. We have to really take a comprehensive and an integrated view if we're going to deal with commodities in any sort of major way. It's essential that we have this type of crossover, this learning, this joint approach, and this is why we've got these guys sitting around the table today.
Matthew Geyer from WWF provided a framework for the discussion on deforestation and commodities.
If you look at what drives deforestation globally, it's really being driven by the production of commodities. So palm oil, soy, beef, and pulp and paper are really the primary drivers of tropical deforestation. And so that's one of the great challenges for the environmental movement right now is not how are you going to stop production of these commodities, but how are you going to make it more sustainable? And how can you do it in a way that preserves the environmental values and still adds to the economic development agendas of developing countries?
Andrew Bovarnik, representing UNDP, made the first presentation, sharing his perspectives on the important role of governments.
From my perspective, the governments, both national and local, play and have to play a central and critical role in this transformation that we're looking at.
Bovarnik acknowledged existing challenges, such as missing legal incentives and enforcement standards, as well as highlighted opportunities to improve stakeholder relationships.
The role, I think, of governments more and more is to help convene the stakeholders across the supply chains. I think governments have recognized that they cannot deal with all these structural issues by themselves. They just don't have the resources. The scale of solution is just too great. And more we're seeing the need for these sort of integrated approaches with the private sector, with effective public-private partnerships, with civil society, with the NGOs, with the producers, etc. And I think it is the government's role to lead the convening of these stakeholders to come together and collaborate.
Sharing insights from private sector to promote positive change, Bruce Weiss from International Finance Corporation described various instruments available to improve the business case.
We still feel that other instruments can play a role with standards to actually drive that change. And when I mean other instruments, it really is things like better enforcement of regulations, the enabling environment. It is incentives that come from the value chain but not the supply chain. So what I mean there is that banks like IFC or other banks starting to provide financial incentives for producers that are adopting standards.
Ian Henderson from UNEP Finance Initiative referred to future work in developing a sustainable financial system.
We talk about financing change and changing finance. Financing change is perhaps better known, and that is physically financing the activities we want to see in sustainable supply chains. And there we talk about risk mitigation instruments, we talk about feed-in tariffs, green bonds are very popular at the moment. Perhaps what we don't understand quite so well at the moment is how we look internally and change the financial system. For this very reason, this is now the subject of something called the UNEP inquiry, which is going to be a 2-year investigation into what a sustainable financial system of tomorrow looks like that can help rather than hinder the allocation of capital to sustainable activities in the world at large. But hopefully within that, there'll be a deep dive on commodity supply chains.
Bringing the perspective of landscape-level approaches, John Buchanan from Conservation International reported on a project in Alto Mayo, Peru, that is now being modeled in other regions.
Through the conservation agreements, we make an explicit agreement with them to say, we will give you technical assistance to improve your coffee practices on the existing lands, and you agree not to cut down any more forests. That work is funded through a REDD+ mechanism. And so it enables us, again, to use voluntary payments to the REDD market, transition that or convert that into benefits to farmers in the way of technical assistance to break the cycle of deforestation.
After participants engaged in discussions by posting comments and questions through a closed-loop Twitter feed, Matthew Geyer concluded by looking forward.
Where we'd like to see the conversation go moving forward, and we're already starting to see these trends, is places where the markets end and the government can kind of come together in the sweet spot, and you have the whole of the supply chain and are able to address all of the supply chain. So you have, on the one hand, you work with the key buyers and work with the traders, and then on the other hand, you work with the producers, and then the governments are there and able to create the enabling environment.